Hey witches, it's Lee and this is Do Magical Thing, and I'm very, very happy to have the wonderful Kath with me from the Geordie Witch and Secrets of the Cauldron. Hello Kath, how are you?
Hello, thank you very much for having me. Very excited. We've been chatting about this for a while, so it's good to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I'm so excited. I know we've known each other for a few years, and one of the things that I really love about you the most is just the sheer breadth of knowledge that you have and just how much you put that out there. And yeah, I just really love on your Instagram page, on the Geordie Witch on Instagram. What I really love is all the different sort of imagery you have there, and I know that you work obviously on there with memes and sort of making them into
Yes.
something more, but also your images that I see from your posts at Secrets of the Cauldron.
Yeah.
What do you think is like the importance of imagery in witchcraft? Does it hold a special place for you, or is it something magical or just mundane?
No, it is magical, and it is really interesting doing both because Geordie Witch, as you know, it is kind of trying to communicate as much relevant information as possible, but through the art of a good meme. And we love a good meme in this community, don't we? And it does amuse me just actually how much traction you can get through and how much information you can get across through kind of just posting a meme, and how popular they are, how many people you can reach, versus even often the most beautifully crafted image. And there's a number of beautiful images on a number of Secrets of the Cauldron. I've got some lovely ones, but so many other accounts, but they don't get the traction in the same way. And I just think that is kind of really, really interesting that you sort of see those two differences, really.
Yeah.
Clearly a community who likes a meme.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I always think memes are magic in themselves in terms of how quickly they sort of spread, and it's that kind of literally the magic, sort of whole idea of about contagion. It just feels very much like it's yeah, it's got legs.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And it was kind of through one really key meme must be about 2 years ago that my account really kind of grew very, very, so like thousands and thousands overnight. And it was literally a full moon meme, and I had like people messaging me going, "Have you seen what's going on in your account?" And I was at a gig, I was, I know, and sort of looked, I was like, wow, how unbelievable. It was just some like silly meme about the full moon where I'd written a bit about kind of what the full moon's energy was, and it just kind of went crazy. And yet you see, I follow a lot of traditional witchcraft accounts, and you see some absolutely kind of stunning photos and some fantastic posts, yet they don't quite get the same traction. It is really interesting.
It is definitely. And obviously Instagram, as you say, you've got like, I think, how many followers have you got now? It's quite a
Yeah, so 25,500.
isn't it? And do you think, why is Instagram like that sort of the best fit for you? Is it the best fit for you? How do you make it work for you as a sort of content creator?
Yes, it is the best fit for me. I think it is because so I only kind of use I don't use TikTok, and I use Facebook just for kind of personal communication and some groups. And so I think that is really good for Facebook's really good for kind of building community, and so we know each other, isn't it, and kind of working in groups. But I think for just getting information out there and being able to get quite a bit of information, but something that isn't absolutely overwhelming. You were limited to your characters on Instagram, aren't you? But you can still get 4 or 5 good paragraphs of information in there. For me, it is just a really good way of getting as much information across as possible, and particularly to the group I'm targeting, which is kind of the newer witches. That type of age group works well for Instagram. The majority of my followers are sort of 16 to 35. A lot of them are in the States. So that is just a really good way of getting as much information across as possible for that group. And then I think on Facebook you do get kind of a slightly different group. I think now I've been on Instagram for a while. There is also behind the scenes a really small but supportive community of people who do always share each other's posts, and who and there's particularly just some fantastic small businesses on Instagram just creating just absolutely beautiful projects, particularly here in the UK, who I'm quite friendly with and really kind of support. They support my work and I support theirs. So there is an underlying community on Instagram as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned about having sort of pragmatic advice and the sort of practical side of things. Do you think that's something that's missing sometimes in the witchcraft community, that sort of pragmatism when it comes to the craft?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think we miss a lot of how to, and that's something that I try to do in all the content is just try to make it practical. So we use a lot of terms, don't we? And we describe a lot of things, but often people still don't actually know what to practically do. You do. So I don't know, we might say something really innocuous like dressing a candle. You know, and people are like, but how? Like, what do I do? I've got my candle. What do you mean dress the candle? So I think it is just trying to kind of keep it really, really practical, but also explain why things are important. We'll give directions, so you'll see it in spells where people will say, you know, do this clockwise, or, you know, fold this away from you, and people don't understand what some of the folk practice or what some of the thinking originally was behind that. So I think it's important to explain where some of these things have come from, and why we may be suggesting you may want to do it this way or that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes we sort of get into this sort of motion, or we just accept stuff and go through the kind of actions and don't have that moment to sort of focus on energy. How much do you think energy, however you sort of define that, and maybe you could define it for yourself in your own terms, but how much do you think energy matters in witchcraft versus perhaps the tools we see quite frequently?
For me, it's huge. It's probably the most fundamental part of my practice is energy work with energy. And the Secrets of the Cauldron, we did a workshop a couple of weeks ago about spellcraft, and I did quite a bit of research about different models of magic leading up to that, about the different ways of thinking about magic and spellcraft, from kind of a purely, you know, mental model, you know, working on actually we're not changing the external world at all, we're just changing ourselves, to a very sort of supernatural approach that actually none of this is us, this is all some sort of supernatural beings, whatever they are for you, kind of, you know, when we do magic, we're petitioning to them, and they are intervening on our behalf. And I'm sort of probably somewhere in the middle, really, of kind of believing that when we do spell work, we are tapping into energy that exists, and that we are able to tap into, influence, draw into ourselves. And I think, but I find it very difficult to do that without tools. I'm in awe of people who can just, you know, do work in the astral realm and do all of that and energetically. I personally don't have that level of concentration. I need tools to kind of, and that's why when I'm my own spell work, I do put quite a lot of aesthetic in there. And I know that can get kind of looked down on. People, you know, will have judgments about, oh, well, it's not real, it's all just too pretty. But for me, it's part of kind of getting in the mood for it, really. Having those visual prompts really help me focus, or the scent prompts, or whatever appeals to your senses, I guess, and that will vary from person to person. But I think that if our tools are really, really effective in being able to create and maintain that connection. And then if you're working with kind of things from the natural world, they'll have their own bit of energy to add as well, won't they? Well, in my opinion, they'll each therefore bring their own bit of energy, as well as being that kind of really helpful focus. And for me, as much different types of energy and layers you can put in your spell work that all points towards that one direction, it's the most effective way I found of working.
Brilliant. Yeah, I really love that. And I love that idea of like layers and building it up, just making it sort of clearer, really, and focusing in on that. And do you say you've got, like, you know, particular, I think it's really key when you're saying about the prompt and things like getting yourself into kind of like a magical mindset almost.
Yeah.
Having that sort of process. Are there particular, do you consider there to be like particular stages of your spell work when you're going through a spell? Is there like this, or does it flow more, you know, or ad hoc?
No, it's more this for me. I'm not a one particularly kind of ad hoc. So for me, it is prior to doing the spell, I will have generally spent a bit of time sort of thinking about figuring out my intent and what my will is for that spell. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the correspondence and the research, and I enjoy that part of it, and figuring out, you know, which combination of colours and herbs and crystals or other symbolism, whatever it is. And that's as much, I enjoy that part as much as kind of the active casting part. And I think sometimes you'll hear people say, well, you know, it has happened to me. Sometimes even just going through that process, you've set something in motion, and that has been enough to kind of make the change occur, which I think is really interesting, even before you've actively kind of started casting. So for then it's kind of the physically getting yourself organized. I think that's, you know, there's nothing ruins a spell than kind of realizing you've got your herbs, you've got this, and you haven't got your lighter, and you run around the house looking for things. and then getting that I guess mindset of I'll do a short meditation, just try and find some music again that chimes with what I'm trying to achieve in the spell, so everything's kind of linking in together. I might even try and wear something. If I'm casting for prosperity, I'll try and wear something that I feel extra in. So, you're kind of bringing that, you're bringing that energy. And then, yeah, that's all part of the magical mindset for me, really, is having that all of you, as many senses as possible engaged in it, as well as that kind of being able to really therefore get your mind focused. And then I will spend quite a bit of time depending on what I'm doing, I'll raise energy in different ways. That could be, it could be something quite physical, doing dancing or stomping. I do kind of a lot of marching around and clapping and shouting and generally carrying on woeful, depending on the spell. And then sometimes I'll be, calling on, I do work with spirits, and I will kind of call other types of energy to come in and support my spell work, and ask them to kind of bring their energy into it. It's kind of been part of my background. And yes, and sometimes that'll change you. Sometimes you do go into spells with plans, and I'm the type of person, I do need a plan to go in. You may therefore feel intuitively drawn to do something else in the moment, but I like kind of a rough outline before I go in of kind of what I'm going to do. I think especially where people are newer to casting as well, there's a lot at the minute, and I do agree with it, but I still think it's really overwhelming for new witches to say, oh, just follow your intuition. Well, I don't know how to follow my intuition. What am I intuitively doing?
Well, how do I inform my intuition? That's great, but
so and so I do think, and I think all of that intent is all that matters, and all of that, I just think all of that's really confusing and just not accurate. It's just not accurate in my experience, never mind confusing. So I do think, especially when you start having a bit of a plan, writing that down if you need to, in some sort of practical steps, can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, so I know you are. I've seen before you mentioned that, intent, isn't everything. It has, there's parts to it, and there's bits and bobs to that. You said, from your experience that, there's a reason for perhaps things being corresponding to a particular way. Do you feel it's been more successful when you've planned things out in terms of outcome of your spells?
Yeah, definitely. I just think there's an inherent power. Some of these correspondences and associations have been around for thousands and thousands of years, haven't they? And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute people need to work something that doesn't feel right to them. But I do think when we say, intent is all that matters, I just don't think that's fundamentally true. I think the character of something, is inherent, especially when you work with kind of things like herbs. A lot of that comes from, the physical properties of the herb. So how much does our intent, or actually when we say that, do we mean actually it's important to have a personal and meaningful relationship with that plant? And therefore, if, a lot of people are allergic to lavender, aren't they? Don't like lavender, so using lavender in a spell for relaxation, if it's something you're allergic to, is not going to work. Whatever your intent is, and that it's just going to use it in a hex and make somebody irritated by all means. But so I just think all of that is, the messages around that have got really a bit confused over the years, and I think that's where we have seen a bit of the bleed over from kind of law of attraction manifestation into witchcraft. And I guess, debate, is there a difference between witchcraft and doing witchy things? Discuss. But I think some of that has got a bit blurred for me, maybe probably been a little bit more of a traditional witch in that sense. But I do think, therefore, it's just led, a lot of the new witches I speak to, they're just really confused. So when they're going in doing their spells and thinking, it doesn't matter what I use because it only matters what my intention is for this spell, generally people aren't getting the results. And actually, when you support people to unpick that, and actually, well, what did you use and why did you use that? And actually, can you just substitute anything for anything because intent is all that matters? Well, probably not really. what we need is sensible and personal relationships with things that are meaningful. I don't think people should be using correspondences that don't make sense to them personally just because it's in a book or we believed it for thousands of years. But I think there's probably a sensible middle ground whereby there's just, I think, an inherent power in knowing some of these things have been used. If you think about all those hundreds of years of people and, you know, cunning folk of the past and our ancestors using some of these things. And I just think that in itself is a form of energy. Yeah. And that belief, it's like going into a place of power, isn't it? If you go into a church, whether you believe in that religion or not, there is an inherent power there because of the belief of the people there, whether it's your belief or not. And I think for me, the same applies to some of the tools, and that is something we can tap into that can be really powerful. Yeah, I did a rather spicy post on Instagram that I did get some stick for with my everything.
Nice. I think
such a few people.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things, you know, it's I think sometimes it's worth knowing the kind of rules in inverted commas and knowing sort of what is kind of there. And I definitely know, as I've sort of gone on in my practice, that later on I've thought about correspondences a little bit more deeply, had some experience through using the traditional ones in spells, and then been like, okay, well, actually, I feel like this is going to be better now through either experience or through intuition, you know, in certain circumstances. Are there, you know, you were saying about herbs, are there particular, do you have like a sort of dream team of herbs you always go back to, or you find yourself using the most? Do you have like a top 5?
Yeah, probably, actually thinking about it. You know, like most of these things, some of the best herbs are the things that we've all got in our kind of kitchen cupboards. You know, it is, things like cinnamon, it's such a good, you know, it punches through most things in my experience. Cinnamon, it's great for unblocking, great for prosperity, great for love. It's got some healing correspondences. I really love lemon balm for any type of healing work. Rose, for me, it's a master flower. You know, it is. If you work with I work with rose as a tincture through herbalism as well, and it is just one of those master flowers. It just does whatever is needed, and there's something about, for me, not just what we are calling through us in a spell, but how we want those things to come to us. And I think adding some things like rose or lavender or whatever your own correspondences are, so things come to us easily and, you know, without disruption. You know, adding some of those things in can really kind of help that. So it's not just what you want, but how you want something to come to you as well. I think can be important. Then yeah, probably then mugwort, and again, mint is another just great all round. I do quite a lot of kind of unblocking work before I do a spell. So I think, you know, things like dragon's blood, lemon, mint, just really good at knocking all of the energy out of the way that may be blocking you. I really like Jason Miller, I think, who talks about macro and micro enchantments and spell work. That, you know, think about what your plan would be. If you want to achieve something, what is your mundane plan? And then think about how you can enchant every step of that plan.
That's really interesting, yeah.
So, you know, do a general spell to bring the general energy of what you're calling to you, and then enchant every kind of step of your action plan along the way. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it, that kind of macro micro enchantments.
Nice, yeah. And would you say that informed, because there's a particular phrase that you use, and I love it, and I've seen it in your planners, and it's the idea of when you're working with a particular thing that you say you're blessing and empowering. It's that kind of bless and empower. Yeah. And that phrase, I don't think there's a more perfect phrase to use than that when it comes to kind of zoning in on your energy. Do you feel that came from that sort of idea of having those enchanted steps? Does that help compound things?
Yes, definitely, because I think we need to tell our components the job we need them to do, you know, and especially like a lot of these herbs, look into any type of correspondence, they've all got multi-uses, haven't they? You know, a lot, especially your most kind of popular herbs, can all be used in a range of ways. So how do we, unless we kind of empower and ask that energy of that plant to work with us in a particular way, kind of how does it know what its job is? So for me, it is that kind of, you know, thank you, I bless you to do this, and I'm empowering you. You know, you need to bring, you're a plant that contains these type of energies, and I need this part of your energy for this spell, please. To again, that's all back to kind of the layering the correspondences, and, you know, using even things like using numbers, using 4 of something, or, you know, as many different ways as possible, the color of the ink you write your petition in, you know, as many things as possible as you can line in, you can pack in, to all kind of align the energy is I think it's been really important to my own spell work.
Oh, gosh, that's so cool. You mentioned your background just before. How did that inform you? Does it have any impact on your practice or the way you formed your path?
Yes, I mean, I remember a family that's a bit woo. So my great grandmother was a spiritualist medium in the spiritualist church, worked on the platforms. It all comes down my dad's side of the family, and not that way like a family of witches or a hereditary witch or anything like that. But I can't remember a time where it wasn't accepted that there was things beyond the physical world. So it was very accepted that you went and got your tarot cards read. Like I can remember, you know, my mum going to get her cards done regularly. There was always somebody really well known in the community who people could go to get messages from spirits. So I guess I never, and therefore my family to this day are very, very accepting of my practice. They, you know, not witches in that sense, but very much kind of spiritual, believing in spirits, believing in energy. Any experiences I talked about as a child of seeing or feeling things, that was never dismissed. I was never told I was imagining it. It was all like, okay, well, what did you say? Did you talk to them? And it was all very just kind of open and natural. So that belief in the spirit world and energy was just always part of our belief. You know, my own dad, if he put his mind to it, could be incredibly psychic and, you know, incredibly talented. So it made sense then as I started kind of getting into my late teens, although I used to go to the spiritualist church, and because the church part never particularly fit with me because it still is a Christian church. The spirit side of it, the sitting in mediumship circles, sitting in spiritual development circles, is something I started doing from a late teenager. And it just was therefore quite easy then in the mid-90s when you start to see that kind of rise of Wicca. That felt at that point anyway a very natural pathway for me, although I've since moved away from Wicca itself. But that falling into that, I can combine both things, something here that is, I don't have to believe in kind of the church and the religion and the God side, but something that brings that energy. I can work with spirits, but just in a different way, therefore just felt very, very natural. So now I do still work with spirits. I work with my ancestors. I work with guides. I work with saints. It has become quite an important part of my practice.
How would you sort of start with that? Because there's been, you know, there's often a lot of talk about ancestor veneration. It's one of those things that is quite, you know, once you tap into it, I always think, you know, sometimes people don't know where to start with that. And, you know, having done it for some years, what would you say are the sort of steps to getting into that, building a practice around it?
Yeah, well, I was always taught kind of start with your ancestors, because it's the safest way to start. And then as you start going on to other spirits, you've already kind of got your spiritual team that will always kind of have your back and will look after you kind of in the spirit world. So but obviously not. And I think it's important to think about what we might mean by ancestors. And ancestors, therefore, it doesn't have to mean physical family, you know, because that is not always a good dynamic for people. We may have people, there may be abuse there may be trauma, there may be people who just wouldn't, you know, agree with witchcraft, and, you know, maybe we're very religious. So I think it's about being sensible initially about, well, who is there who, whether you've known them or not, and it may be people kind of going way back in your ancestry, depending on how much information you know, who is there either in, you know, my immediate family, in my community, in people I've looked up to, in in-laws, who I may be able to kind of, I think I could form a contact with. So I think it's important to first to think about, what do we mean by ancestry? What does it mean to you? And to not feel it has to be physical blood ancestors if that is a difficult place for a range of reasons, or people who've been adopted and just might not know who their ancestors are for a range of reasons. I think that that's an important to start thinking about kind of what that means to you. And then I would say just set a very, very simple altar. I was always told glass of water, white candle, if you've got any type of photo or memento, you know, anything that I guess brings the energy, that type of signature energy of that person in, whether it's something they liked, something they like to drink, their chocolate, whatever it was. If you know that, then, you know, you could just start creating a very, very simple altar with that type of in, and then just kind of sit and reach out and ask them to draw close. It's about forming a relationship like we do with anybody, you know. It's about, we wouldn't go asking strangers in the streets for things, so start and demand they help you with this and help you with that. If you've got no relationship with them, probably not going to go down terribly well. So, you know, what do we do when we're trying to befriend anybody? We're nice, we're respectful, we're friendly, we're consistent, we might offer a little present, you know. It's I would apply the same principles. And then if you know, you may just get a sense, you may just get for me, spirit work, it's a very, very unmistakable physical sensation. So I will physically feel the air move and the energy come in. Some people will feel energy come in from a certain side, depending on if it's maybe mum or dad's side, or male or female. So it is about just kind of playing around with that a little bit, and you might over time start to get a consistent feeling of, oh, when I do this, I get this feeling from my left hand side, or I get this pain in my shoulder, and, you know, is that kind of telling me something? And just doing that regularly, and alongside that, if you can develop a bit of a meditation practice and do some of those energy basics of grounding, centering, shielding your energy, learning how to, you know, manipulate your energy, it just, I think, makes you a bit more sensitive to be able to pick up on some of those subtle things. Or you might get your messages through your tarot cards. You might want to use divination and ask for messages via your deck, or your dreams, or automatic writing, or, you know, whatever that looks like for you, however people feel comfortable with that. I think there's lots of different ways of going about it, but I do think it is about just initially, how would I go about forming a relationship with this person if they were here, and following the same type of principles. And then when you've got that relationship established, then you can start inviting them into your space when you do spell work and saying, can you join me in this? I'm casting for this. Can you send me your energy? And yeah, and you know, it's been very powerful, whether that's ancestors or guides or saints, you know, whoever, or even deities, if that's people's paths. I think the same principles apply. I just often think it's easier to start with ancestors.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's definitely fruitful with ancestors. I think, you know, for someone who's had some family estrangement and things going on there, you know, there's definitely a sort of sense of wanting to kind of make a connection there, but not necessarily knowing how comfortable I would be with that. And so I definitely kind of experimented with little offerings, and then I found out about an ancestor's particular favorite sweet, and then offered that for, you know, once a month. Yeah. And there's someone I never met, but like, you know, the stories passed down through the family, and it was interesting. And there was a maternal figure in the family. And then when I did a tarot reading using a spirit deck, because I thought, well, it's appropriate, maybe it's a bit on the nose, but you know, why not? So I used a spirit deck, and I got this maternal card come up with this figure coming back from Grower from Norse mythology, who came back from the dead to help their descendant in this quest. Wow. And that was a really weird moment for me of like, oh, okay, somebody's there, somebody's looking out for me. That's and just like all the little sweets. I wasn't just putting sweets in a bowl, and like that was that. I was like, okay, I'll keep doing this then. I don't feel like such a plum cud. I mean, I think, yeah, you know, you do these practices and you're like, I'm drawing on a candle, I'm burning a leaf, like what am I doing? And then you have those moments of just like, whoa, okay. Have you had any of those kind of moments where you've had like this big aha, or is it little things that have built up? Like this could be with sort of offering practices, or it could be with your spell work. What would you say are those sort of big key whoa moments for you?
I think the first, probably a couple, some that I've learned the aha moments by doing the wrong thing. often. So, and then yeah, there was a big aha moment for me when I resolved something through spell work within a real intractable problem within 24 hours. A situation that had been a really difficult situation with a friend that through work had been kind of going on and on, a really kind of unpleasant situation, and I was going to be in a meeting with that person the following day, and I just thought, this is just going to be absolutely horrendous. There's no way around it. I can't avoid it. This is going to be really, really difficult. All the loads and loads of problems leading up to that. And I did a more traditional version of kind of a sweet jar with kind of lavender and sugar and rose and lemon balm and all kinds of lovely relaxing herbs with kind of a petition with both of our names on, and walked into the meeting that day, and it just went so perfectly, and I thought, that shifting of the situation that quickly really was just like, wow. But I think one of the most powerful things I learned, we had a real phase of some break-ins here a few years ago, really, really difficult, loads of problems in the area and attempted break-in. So I decided I was going to really start amping up the protection, and I used one of Bree's spells, her Fiery Wall of Protection spell, all made up with myself, you know, going around, made it all up, went around, I had fire, imagined fire going on and all the rest of it. That worked really well, got no more break-ins. Guess who forgot that the car isn't actually parked on the property, and the car got robbed.
Man.
So that was no more problems here, but that was like that was the car was parked on the streets, and yeah, it was within about 48 hours later. It was like, okay, that's a good lesson. And then recently, I one of the things we were talking about in the workshop was about making sure you're ready for the change you are asking for, you know, and actually, are you really ready in terms of those unconscious blocks we put on ourselves, going back to kind of the magical mindset. You know, you may be asking for something, but actually, are you really ready? Are you really ready for that relationship that you're asking for? Is the room in your life for that person, you know, and thinking through, actually, am I, these changes, what's it really going to kind of look and feel like when they happen? And we'd bought a new house, and we just caught up in COVID, a real intractable problem of having successfully bought the house, not getting the keys, went on and on. We were beginning to lose hope that it was ever going to start coming through. So again, smart ass here, I'm going to do a spell to speed this up, but loads of things in to kind of speed, to create speed. I had coffee and cinnamon and dragon's blood, lots of things to kind of add power and energy. And then it all came through so quickly, it completely caught us unawares, and we got the keys at like 5 o'clock on a Friday night, out of the blue, with no preparation. We had no security. So again, it was like a lesson about, you know, are you ready for the changes that you're asking for?
Oh my gosh.
One of the most powerful, it was the first, the group we were in there, when we've occasionally done group spells together, one of the very first ones we did back on Valentine's Day, a couple of years ago now, it really struck me about the sense of group energy you can get even when you're all over the world, and probably not all even casting at the same time, because we're all in sort of, so that idea of time and space not necessarily applying in spell work all the time, that, you know, you do enter a bit of a different liminal time and space sometimes, don't you? Because I really literally felt a different type of group energy, even though we were all probably operating over maybe a 24, 48 hour period, you know, over different parts of the world. So that was a really kind of interesting experience for me.
Definitely. Do you think, as well as sort of asking yourself whether you're ready for something that you're thinking of casting for, what would you say are kind of the other steps you should take before you actually cast a spell, or before you do a magical working?
I think we really do need to be very careful about our intent, our wording, making sure that that is as clear as possible, but also that we have done any work on any unconscious blocks, that I talk about in the planner about, we're our most potent when we bring our full selves to the altar. So there is something about really kind of knowing yourself, isn't there? And knowing if you're casting for something, are you really doing some self-defeating behaviors as well to unconsciously often, get in your own way for that, really. If you've got blocks around kind of prosperity or love or your own healing, are you ready to do the mundane work that we have to do after casting the spell to bring that to fruition? It is about spell work ultimately is creating a change in the physical world. So something physically, often, unless you're casting for self-love or your own anxiety or whatever that is, but if you're casting for something, if you're influencing a situation or another person, something has got to physically shift in the real world. So somebody at some point has got to take some sort of practical physical action that has been influenced by the energy relating to that spell. So are you in a position to do that work? Are you able to do it? Is now the right time? So I think there is quite a bit to think about, especially in some of those bigger goals prior to casting, to make sure you're out of your own way, really, and you are in a position, and that you're just in the mindset, are you feeling well enough to do it? Often, sometimes if you're feeling particularly kind of run down, even if you've got a cold, it just might not be kind of the right time to cast. Your energy might be a bit wonky that day. So, it is that kind of checking in. Is this the right time for me?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And once you've sort of done that thought process and you've worked through things, what would you say is a good sort of first spell for somebody? Say, because I think oftentimes new folks, they think, and they do a lot of the theory work, and then they kind of, it's like they almost stall the car on it. They kind of stall just before the spell itself. What is a good spell to start off with, to kind of just get it over with, in a way, get your spell casting done? Is there a preference that you have for like a first time kind of practitioner?
Yeah, I think mine would always be candle magic, and or protection work, and combining those. But I do think we create a lot of myths in the community, don't we, about don't cast a spell until you've done this, this, and this, and you've read all of these books. And yes, I'm the first to say knowledge is really important. But in my experience, the chances are, as New Witch, I think we over exaggerate what can go wrong, because unless you're throwing hexes and curses around without any of the basics in place, or you're demon summoning 101, the chances are that casting your first spell, the worst thing that's going to happen is nothing's going to happen. It's just not going to work, is it? We really over exaggerate, I think, all of these dangers. So the chances of a new witch being able to create that much focus and that much energy to make something so drastically backfire, I think we really over exaggerate those things. So that said, though, I think candle magic, because it can be really, it's one of those things, candle magic can be as simple or as complex as you like, depending on how people like to work, and any type of protection work, protecting your home, protecting yourself, creating yourself a little amulet and talisman, apart from anything else, and then just gives you that confidence to be able to go on and do other things, knowing that you've got some form of magical protection in place. So I'm a big kind of believer in getting some of those energy foundation practices in place prior to kind of casting, just being able to make sure you can ground, center, shield your energy. I think is really important as well.
And should someone do those kind of foundations repeatedly, on a daily basis, on a only at certain times? What would you say would be the best way for somebody to hone their skills with that? Would it be that they perhaps do them apart from casting, or only at casting? What would be your take on that?
I think it's a skill. I think it's one of those, all of them. And I think spell work itself is a skill, it's a muscle, and the more you do it, I don't believe we should just be saving spell work for big occasions or big goals. I think there's nothing wrong with doing. Obviously, you've got to take your mundane your mundane actions. Don't be using spell work when you've really just got to have an awkward conversation. But that said, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think it's a bit of a limited mindset to say we should only be kind of saving magic for kind of certain things. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing things regularly. But I do think a couple of times a week being able to spend 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, if people can get into the habit of doing every day, of doing a quick grounding and centering, and especially shielding their energy, especially out there in the world, absolutely great. If you can get into that discipline and you can build that into your routine, that would be absolutely fantastic. But if you can't, at least doing it 2 or 3 times a week, doing that kind of mini meditation, a little grounding and centering exercise, getting your energy, practicing rubbing your hands and raising energy, manipulating energy a few times a week, I think, outside of spell work, I think really helps kind of prime those muscles and really makes people's spell work start shifting.
Yeah, I do think sometimes you do just, do the magical thing. I do think you sometimes just have to get on with it and give it a go and, experiment. And like you say, sometimes I know some of my early spells, they just sort of didn't do much. And it was like, oh, okay. And I was so het up beforehand and I was like, oh, okay. But you do learn. I think you learn by experience. And I think, it's like, if you paint something, you soon know how to mix colors better the more you paint. Do you know what I mean? It's that thing of getting experience and realizing what does and doesn't work. And I think, it's just getting stuck in is really helpful, with obviously the caveat of, of mindfulness there. It's mentioned about hexing and that kind of thing. Obviously it can be a bit of a controversial topic, but what's your take on hexing, cursing and witches and the modern practice with that?
I mean, I think it is about doing something kind of appropriately, and I think it's important people think through their ethics and where they stand on it, and I don't believe we should be throwing hexes and curses around for kind of petty reasons just because somebody's upset you that day. But I think it's important that everybody learns about it, because if nothing else, you may need to know how to defend yourself against it. But I think that idea of kind of battle magic and defense magic, not everything is sweetness and light in this world, is it? Whether that's mundanely or magically. And there may be times when you've got to really assertively stand up for yourself magically. And if that helps either protect yourself or protect loved ones or promote healing because you have been able to, adjust the balance of something really bad has happened. When I was going through the phases of those break-ins, I sort of did a kind of a protective hex in the end. It was not I'm hexing these people, it was if you do this again you will get this, and there's kind of a line this far and no further line in the sand.
A bit of a magical booby trap.
Yes. So I'm not coming after you, but if you come after me there will be consequences. So I do think it is important that everybody has understands it, works out where they stand on it, knows how to diffuse and defend themselves against it. But I have personally cast hexes and curses, not a lot. I haven't had to do it a lot. I'm very lucky in that sense. But I would do it again if I had to.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think, having cast one myself, it's one of those things that you think about and you do, and I think it's not something. Yeah, it's that kind of thing of like the difference between when people say, "Oh, you're a good witch or a bad witch," and it's like, well, I'm a witch. Do you know what I mean? I think ethics are very situational. I think that it is something that, and I do sort of lean towards the thing, like you say, of that kind of this line no further sort of practice when it comes to that kind of magic. But I think witchcraft being a toolbox, if there's certain tools you need to use sometimes, probably less frequently than others. But having access to them, like you say, even if it's just to know how to defend against that, then I think is a good thing. And with with the kind of you're saying about with being break-ins and things like that and stuff, like sort of, it seems with urban magic gets sort of a bit of it feels like it's sort of a lesser practice, or a lesser spoken about practice in like city magic and stuff like that, those kind of environments where, where you might get more crime, or you might feel like it's a little bit more concretey, there's no sort of big forests, or there's no, vast bodies of water and things like that, it's all kind of hemmed in. Do you feel like cities have their own magic? Is there a way of sort of being a witch in a city that can be more expansive than what we think?
Yes, absolutely. I think it just does take a little bit more kind of creativity. I think about things in a different way. So I've done grounding work with really big old buildings, to kind of, thinking about the elements in a different way. I think it is about maybe thinking about earth representing some beautiful big old stone buildings, to me are going to have as equal power as the forest. So, and then I do think there is something about actually really beautiful just about still spotting how stubborn nature is in a city environment. I heard a herbalist talking the other day about dandelion and saying if there was one plant you could study forever and still not understand, it would be dandelion, because of its just sheer kind of stubbornness and ability to kind of appear everywhere. And I think you do when you in an urban environment, walk around and still kind of looking for signs of nature and things. I do think when you kind of see, you walk around a corner and kind of all of a sudden a little wildflower patch has sprung up I was in a real little plot of wasteland. All of a sudden loads of cornflowers had appeared the other day. I was beyond excited. I was running home and running back with me bag to pick a few. So I do think there is just something like really, really inherently magical when you come across things like that. So I do think it is about thinking about the elements a bit differently, and really kind of marveling therefore when you do see kind of nature peeking through. But it also gives you the opportunity to kind of think about energy in a different way. I was trying to explain about kind of working with energy and being part of something that is bigger than you. And kind of the best thing I think of is actually being in the middle of something like a football match or a gig where everybody is singing, or everybody's in United in the moment, aren't they, singing that song, or kind of celebrating that goal, and that sense of when you're in those crowds of energy is as palpable as it is in spell work, isn't it? So I think it is just about kind of trying to perceive things in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think, having moved from the countryside more to a city, and it's a green scene nonetheless, but still, I think it's having those little markers of dandelion. There was a dandelion growing out of a wall, just determined to, be bold, and it was huge. And there's loads of valerian around here, just endless amounts of valerian, which is random and helpful. And I love it. But I think one of the things that with the sort of taller buildings and such like is that you do kind of miss things like the moon, and sometimes you have to sort of step out a little bit, and it can mean I kind of get out of the sort of organization of my magic. And one of the things that's really helped me is your wonderful planner, which is just been so great for kind of reconnecting and prompting me to go out and go, oh yeah, that thing up there, I work with that, and that's quite helpful. And I think, with witchy planners, they can be a bit hit and miss, and especially as someone who's non-theist, who doesn't incorporate the deity side of things, there's often a presumption of path, and that for me is really frustrating, because often, planner is something that you're working with. It kind of has like an energy of its own, at least to me, and it's something you put your energy into and use it to manage your energy, really. With your planner, the magical guide to the waning and waxing year, it comes in 2 parts of the year. Why did you sort of go for the 2 different halves? Why not one whole year?
But there's a mix of sort of magical and practical reasons as well, really. We wanted to get as much information in there as we can. We decided we wanted to try and make it practical, that each week there would be a kind of witchy thing to do, whether it's a new or full moon or a spell or an activity. And then when we thought about what that looked like over 12 months, actually, this is going to be huge, and it's actually going to be so thick people won't really be able to use it. So you know, new product, little new business. How is it going to work? Is anybody, you know, are we going to spend forever doing the full 12 months and people aren't going to buy it anyway? So so it was a bit of, well, let's just try. Well, let's do 6 months, see if people get it. We're very, very blessed that people did, and we're very grateful for that. And we did both, Cheryl and I, Cheryl Curtaro, it was my business partner, Seekers in the Cauldron, both work a lot with the Wheel of the Year, although we're both non-theist. We both work with that seasonal energy as sort of markers for our own internal energy. And Cheryl particularly is very lunar based in her practice, well, sort of solar around lunar based in her practice. So we did want something that just did kind of have a different flavour from the lighter and darker half of the year, both in maybe some of the general activities that you would do, but also maybe, you know, just in kind of the look and feel and the little bit of aesthetic for it. So it was a bit of a mix of sort of practical, let's do 6 months and see how it goes, and magical theory behind it.
Yeah, I think that it's the pragmatism coming back again. I like it.
Yeah.
But honestly, because the thing is, when I found out you were making it with Cheryl Kerr, I was like, oh, I knew it was going to be something that was just a relief in a way. Do you know those things you read and you're just like, oh, you have a sigh of relief because you're like, this is what I've been looking for like however long. Do you know what I mean? And so I think what was really helpful for me is definitely having those little pointers and prompts, you know, at the end of the month or at the beginning of the month, to sort of thinking about, you know, what you're wanting to bring into the new month, what you kind of learned from the last one, and having that kind of element of shadow work in there, if you would call it that. I think, you know, it's that exploring. I think what I really like about it is that it's kind of more show don't tell in a way. You know, you've got that advice, but it's very much, I really like the visuals are really beautiful. I love all the kind of,
we've got a fantastic illustrator. She's brilliant. And our designer who does all the layout. They're a great little team who are pleasure to work with. It's
just great because I really like as well is the amount of space you get as well.
Yeah.
Because I know I bang on about this on my channel, but I will always bang on about it because being a lefty, I find it really hard to like get in there, get the detail in there, and it's got the little to-dos in there. You know, I've tried bullet journals. I invariably fail with those sorts of things. So this has been like really cool for me to be able to sort of get my teeth into it and keep it witchy, because I think sometimes we end up having this sort of planner for our mundane life, and then you've kind of, where do you put your magical stuff in? I mean, it's really sort of difficult. And yeah, I just love the way you approach it and how neutral, you know, you go into sort of seasonal celebrations, and you know, the thing that I love the most, and I know you've got like a shed load of knowledge and you very generously share it, but the correspondences and like the kind of book of shadows section at the back was just unreal for me. I think like there are a lot of books out there on the witchy market which don't include half the information in probably 3 times as many pages that section does. Why was it important for you to include that in the planner? Because you could have left that out. You could have just gone, here's the planner, you know. But what was the reason behind having that in there?
I think we did want something that a new witch could pick up, and we really thought about the order, especially for the first one. We really thought about the order things appeared in, so people could really know very little and pick it up and actually say, right, if I could follow this by the end of the 6 months, I've got a reasonable practice, I've cast a few spells, I've got the basics of energy work, and I've got the basics of kind of the key things of the correspondences to be able to start and form and develop and tweaking my own practices. The other thing we were really keen with the spells is not just writing kind of the list of components, but why they're being included for that spell as well, and then try and link that back to the correspondences, so then people could say, oh, I don't have that, but I know if I look at the back, I can find something else that I do have because I know why I'm using that particular kind of component. And we just then wanted to kind of include a bit of just kind of other information that might be useful, just like, you know, the basics of the planets, the basic kind of different phases of the moon, colours, So yeah, it was just to try and have a little bit of a practical kind of one-stop shop, just based on the stuff that me and Cheryl get asked all the time. Cheryl's always asked about, how do I work with the moon? How do I do this? I'm constantly asked, how do I start? I'm really interested in this, but I have no idea where to start. I've read all these books, I'm really confused. So it was if you were going to start with nothing and you had 6 months to try and get some basics going, what would people need to know? Whilst not writing a book,
Yeah.
and keeping it sort of planner. So yeah, we tried to kind of get in as much as we could. The dangerous is it keeps going. I keep going. Oh, well, they still need to know that bit, that activity that we put in that month. They still need to know that. So actually, that now needs to go in the book of shadows. By the end, we're finished. It's going to be like that. Cheryl will kill me.
How is the collaboration process between the two of you? Because obviously both really knowledgeable people. How do you sort of, work out how or what sort of benefits do you both give to the process of creating this planner?
Yeah, she's definitely the lunar and astrology queen. I'm definitely learning astrology, and I do absolutely love it. But Cheryl's got much more knowledge than I do in relation to that. So she generally picks up anything to kind of do with she does all the new and full moon, all the correspondence relating to the planets and all of that. And then I tend to do kind of the witchcrafting ways, which is our sort of weekly our monthly activity, and then I do the spells, and then I have to say she's the queen of the organization and the making sure we've got a printer, and I do some of kind of the thinking and the content creation, how it might all kind of come together, but none of it would happen without kind of Cheryl harassing the printer on a regular basis. And she's got a fantastic, she's double Gemini, so she's got a fantastic ability to harass people and still keep them on side at the same time, which is a skill not to be underestimated in my experience.
Yeah, no, Gemini.
So we've got such we do have really kind of complements. So our areas, we've never kind of had any clash on anything, because our areas just sort of fit together. So we're not disagreeing about something, because I trust her knowledge, she trusts mine. We each kind of get on with our own bits and pull it together. Yeah, so it does work. And it's bizarre, I met her through a tarot card read, and we've only actually known each other a couple of years. I went to her for a read, and at the end of it she just said, she went, I think me and you will be working together. And I was just like, at the time, although I had my Instagram thing going, I wasn't. It's like, I have a full-time job, and I haven't got time for any of that. I don't think so, but she knew more than I did there.
Oh, I love it, honestly. It's so funny to talk about collaboration and like different strengths and coming together. Organised a moot recently, and with lovely Jen, who's a cover mate of mine, and she's very organised, very on it, fantastic on the social media side of things, and I kind of like come up with the ideas, bits and bobs and things like that, and it's just this weird sort of interlinking thing. And I think when you find that, it's so rewarding. It's so like, oh wow, okay, this is really cool, and that's just that's super awesome. And with the astrology side of things, you said you kind of really got into that. How do you think the astrology sort of impacts your practice yourself? Was it something that was revelatory to you? Was it something that was more subtle than that? What do you think is your take?
It was absolutely revelatory to me. I mean, I spent my first year with my mouth constantly hanging open, because the tutor sort of teaches astrology through looking at your own birth chart. So you're constantly, as he's kind of explaining, well, actually your mum's birth experience was probably like this, because this is in your chart, and like you can see that, and that's it. Absolutely nothing has blown my mind as much as kind of learning astrology. So yeah, and again, that was Cheryl saying, I really think you should do this course. You're really geeky. I think you'll really like it. And it really was. So it's massively influenced, not just in practice, but just kind of my own kind of self-development and knowledge practice, just in terms of practical things, like having a much better understanding of the planetary energy and how to combine and pull that into spell work, how the correspondences work with the planets. how you can work with different time and in different, different phases and transits, and what that might look, what kind of might be power days for you personally because of how different things are combining in your chart. And actually, I think it's one thing we were talking about is actually looking at your own chart elementally, and actually what that might give you clues to where some of your magical strengths might be, depending on how or indeed where there is an absence of an element, and what might be a shadow element for you and something you need to do sort of some work on. So I do think that interplay between astrology, I mean, I think you can't just look at it purely as self-development or predictive work, and it will still be absolutely mind-blowing. But I think actually being able to bring the two together has definitely added an extra element to my own practice.
Yeah, definitely. I think with astrology, I think people always think of it as just the sun sign, and when I realized it was more than that and looked into it, in terms of, you've got Mercury, communication side of things, and all that sort of breadth of, it's almost like these kind of planetary, like it's almost that scene in that film about emotions, and it's the animated film Inside Out.
Oh,
and it's
yes.
that kind of thing. It's almost as if they're all like the little different planets they're playing together.
Oh, I love that.
Like, it's that kind of thing of like them all being there and being almost like buddies, but also sometimes you're like, so it's that kind of combination. But it's been really weird because looking deeper into, and I say deeper, very sort of basically deeper into the other than the sun sign, looking at it is sort of, there's moments where I'm like, oh, okay, and that's sort of just a really weird acknowledgement of like, because I'm someone I'm kind of healthily skeptical. I'm not, I'm generally sit in the middle of materialism versus complete woo. It's that middle ground for me, and that sort of what if. But sometimes something happens and you look at things and you go, okay, I'm just gonna go with this, because like this is I think even if you just use it as, like you say, as that kind of exploration of yourself, which is essentially, I suppose, what ceremonial magicians kind of do with the planets in a way, is that exploration of the psyche. Even if you do it like that, you're spending a bit of time with yourself and thinking about how you live in the world, and I think that can only be a good thing. Do you know what I mean? And I just think it's just it's a fascinating thing. I've definitely learned so much from you on that, and I really appreciate your posts and on Instagram, and obviously with the Secrets of the Cauldron on the website, and you've got an app as well. Just the whole thing is just really, really awesome. And you mentioned about divination. Do you have a preference when it comes to divination? Do you have one thing that works better for you than others, or is it a bit of a mixed bag?
Probably tarot. And I like using tarot for spell work as well. So probably tarot. I would love to be like you and be able to read the runes, but I struggle with kind of the connection. But I think cards, I'm just an avid collector of different decks, just purely for kind of the aesthetic, if nothing else, really. And I like changing my decks up with the season. And so I'm very excited by the idea of Julia Dyer. She's bringing out different decks she did the Season of the Witch, didn't she, last year, which was the Samhain deck. She's got a Yule deck out this year, and I think her plan is to do one for each of the Sabbats. So that's extremely exciting for me, because I do use them in kind of my altars and for spell work. I think they're great for if people struggle to visualize and need that real kind of physical prompt for spell work. I think oracle cards, tarot cards, anything like that, therefore work kind of really, really well as those kind of calling those archetypal energies in. So yes, I do.
Yeah, no, I do like tarot. Yeah, I do love the runes. I'm just, in terms of familiarity with them. But tarot, since my grandmother, bless her, she gave me a deck because she just doesn't use it. And she said, look, if you have it, you can use it. Or if you use it, you can have it. And just using the cards, it's funny, after a while, you end up with, oh, yeah, you again. You know what I mean? With that kind of pulling out the different cards and having different energies. And I think thematically, it's definitely helped to separate, as I said before, having, I've got my cards for sort of general readings and things like that, but having that spirit deck specifically for the ancestors and having that specific energy kind of tied to that particular deck, and having other sort of more frivolous decks, whether it's just for the aesthetic or otherwise. But yeah, I do love a bit of divination. Do you find you use it as something before spell work at all, or do you use it kind of afterwards to review? What is your sort of take on using it alongside that?
Yeah, I think it'll depends. So I do use it beforehand, really to make sure my intent's right, make sure that my energy's in the right place for it. Is there any blocks or obstacles I need to be aware of that I might need to take care of first, be that mundanely or magically, before casting. But I think also it can be, I think one of the biggest problems we have with spell work, isn't it, is I think, we do all this work, do all this energy and send this energy off. And then if we're not careful, we're in danger of constantly pulling it back to us by like, is it working? Is it working? Is the sign, is the sign, is this happening? Is that happening? And I do believe that kind of once you've like, unless you've purposely constructed something to be an ongoing, like I do quite a lot of kind of 7 or 21 day rituals, unless you've constructed something for like, in that way, I think if you've cast it, you need to just kind of let it go and do its thing, or else you're kind of constantly pulling it back to you, aren't you? But I do think therefore using, if something you're not getting this after waiting a reasonable length of time, you aren't getting any sign that it's working, then doing some divination about what's going on, and do I need to redo this again? Is it just not the right time? What do I need to change up? Can be really useful as well.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I love that. I think what was cool is that I know one of the sort of differences I saw in terms of the planner of the waxing versus the waning year was that you included some really interesting tarot card correspondences in terms of like the spell goals and then the signifier. What was your process of including them in the planner? What did you sort of think about as you were doing that?
Yeah, we want, because we've got a couple of tarot spells in the planner, and we wanted to just again being able to provide information to empower people to say, actually, well, how can I use the wider correspondences in other spell work? So we spent quite a lot of time thinking. We've tried to sort of, as you've seen in the correspondence section, sort of keep some consistent sections so people, can, whether they're looking at herbs, crystals, colours, and look for prosperity or love or healing or whatever it is. And so we kept those consistent. And then we worked as hard as we could to take out some of the gender norms that are associated with tarot and try and make them, we tried as hard as we can to make everything as neutral as possible. We tried to move away from calling the moon her and, all of that. And it's just, it's so endemic, it's just everywhere, isn't it? You've really got to push yourself and be really aware all the time of falling into some of that language. It's so easy to do. So we did, and it wasn't an easy process. It did go between me and Cheryl, go backwards and forwards a couple of times, kind of trying to take out any of that gendered language and have it as well, what's the energy of it trying to say, taking out any of the gender aspects.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I do love it. I love the sort of, you can just tell it's been sort of thought out. And I think that's the thing, especially in publishing at the moment, witchcraft being quite the trend, and it goes through those peaks and troughs of being trendy. You get some stuff that goes out there without a lot of thought, or by perhaps people who aren't as deep into the practice as perhaps would be helpful. And I think what I love about it is it's just so, it's the size that you can put it in your bag, no problem. Yeah. I mean, mine's all like busted up from being in my bag all day and having those bits and bobs, but it's all the detail that I really, really appreciate, and just how packed it into it is. And I love the concept of sort of looking over your spells afterwards and looking at sort of the ritual kind of record. What is the sort of benefit really of having that record, would you say?
I think it just really helps improve your practice, isn't it? It's really important to, I tell people who are maybe really interested in this, but really kind of maybe skeptical either of themselves or whether any of this, works or is real, is just to kind of just go in with a mind of curiosity and experiment. And like any good kind of scientist, anybody who's experimenting, you would be recording your results and having that, try not to get overly attached to the particular outcome, but just kind of go, well, if I do this, let's see what happens, and I'll get an outcome, and maybe I'll need to tweak it and redo it again. But I also think it's important to look back in times of kind of, doubt. I was talking to one of my Instagram posts at the minute about I feel like at the minute a bit of imposter syndrome, because I spend all of my time writing and talking about witchcraft, not actually doing it. So, you know, sometimes you need those records, don't you, to be able to kind of go back and go, oh, well, yeah, actually, in those kind of moments of doubt, whether it's self-doubt or doubt the energy or whatever it is, that you've got that record, as well as being able to really be a bit forensic about what does or doesn't work. One of the things we talk about in the planner is the different ways of looking at timing. And there's lots of different ways to look at magical time. There's different planetary hours, whether you work with the moon, the sun season, the day of the week, whatever it is. It's really difficult to work with all of those things at once. But you may have one really works for you and one doesn't. I think without recording some of that in detail, you'll never really figure out which of those combinations works best for you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely become a real tool for me in terms of structuring, you know, because my concentration isn't the best. So having that there and just in one place is really good. You know, I'm either looking at the planner, or I'm like flinging out books from my shelf of blooming books, and yeah, and I'm looking forward to sort of, you know, what, you know, you put the planner out there, you know, you've got some feedback. What's been the best sort of thing that you've heard people say about it, and what's been your kind of biggest sort of like, oh, okay, moments when it comes to sort of people talking about the planner with you?
And what makes me most excited is when people share this, doing the spells on kind of, you know, people tag us in posts where they're, you know, doing their moon journal that month, or they're doing a spell. That just brings us absolute joy to see people. You know, we're not daft. We know not everybody's using it week in and week out. You know, me and Cheryl aren't using it week in and week out. But, you know, knowing people dip in and out of it, and we all dip in and out of things, don't we? That's life. But then when people kind of do, right, no, I am going to do this spell this month, and they tag us in it, and they tell us they've had an outcome, they've done this, and they've seen this result. It just brings us absolute joy. We keep asking for kind of critical feedback to, you know, well, what doesn't work and what needs to be improved, but everybody's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, it's difficult to improve on something that's so like considered. And I'm not just, you know, blowing smoke up your, you know, proverbial. I genuinely, you know what I'm like. I'm always someone who's, you know, supports people, but not unjustly. Do you know what I mean? I think it's something that I really, you know, I just really value and I love. And it's those weird moments when people come to you. Like I remember when I did this video on the prosperity spell, because I've kind of been trying to build up with, you know, before the spell and the concepts of magic, and then finally I put it out there and I was a bit like, oh gosh, you know, I put something out there and it's something that, you know, I was like, it's something kind of personal in a way, isn't it? A spell is sort of like that thing that's kind of yours, and then you're like, oh, I hope it's good enough. And like, there you go. And then someone very kindly messaged me with a picture of them doing the spell, and I was like, what? It was just so crazy. I was just like, wow, that is, yeah, it's still one of those moments of just, you know, creating content and things like that.
Yeah.
Something you hope someone gets something from it, but when someone actually messages you and goes, hey, look, I did the thing, you're like, what? That's so awesome. I just, I love that so much. I love it so much. I think it's so cool. And I think, keeping things like, what I like is sort of the accessibility of the spells. They're often really something that you can get very easily in terms of ingredients and tool wise as well. Do you have like a particular, and I tend to ask this, I think I asked this of Brie as well, do you have like a top 5 tools, but it can't be crystals, incense, or divination? Are there? I know those are the 3 good ones, but
she says looking over. It isn't there actually, but I do believe if we use whatever the mundane, no matter how mundane it is, if we use something repeatedly in magic, it does develop its own power. So I've got like really like daft things that I think really like my coffee grinder that I use to make my powders. I just think is now just, if it's made so many different powders, kind of, it's just got its own inherent magical powder. I try and use the same spoon, which again I think is developed. But my my top, I've got a wooden. It's like a tree slice wooden, but it's got a pentacle carved on, and I use it to charge things on, and it is covered in wax and oil. I mean, it's absolutely manky, but you've just got to put your hand over and you can just sense it. It's charged just so many herbs and crystals and spell jars and things over the years that it is really has got a its own kind of real magical energy now. And that is what I really love, the fact you can take this very mundane object, just like a teaspoon from your kitchen, and through kind of using it, putting a bit of thought of sort of, blessing it and consecrating it, and then, using it, that it does build up its own energy of its own, even though it was just something you've taken out of your drawer. I think, I think like a lot of witches who started maybe in the 90s bought the wand, the chalice. I've got a chest full of all of the formal magical tools, and they are beautiful to look at, never been used.
No, it's so true. And I think when I first got into the craft, you have that tick list, don't you, of like what I need to have to be a proper witch, and it's all this sort of stuff, and it's just like half of that stuff I've either gifted to someone else or just, I don't know, it's in a drawer, or it's been given away, or it's funny things like that. And I just think repeated use is such an important thing. I've got this little it's a square of wood now, because it's kind of broke off its base, and it's got a little metal ring on it, because it's for incense cones.
Oh yeah.
And it's literally about this big, but it's one of the most like magical things I own, because I've burnt pretty much all the incense that I've burnt during rituals or spells and things on this thing. Taking it all sorts of places because it's so small. And it looks kind of ugly, and it's burnt, and it's all this stuff, but like I love it so much, because it's just my little thing, it's just that object. And I think we can use those sort of archetypal things in a way. I think the most useful thing I've got is my cauldron, which is a big old cast iron thing. Nice. And that's been kind of weird, because initially I got it, and we've kind of had a process, me and the cauldron, of getting to know each other. Because like initially I got it because you're meant to have a cauldron, that kind of thing, and it was this big thing from this old secondhand crazy shop called the Cat and Cauldron in Glastonbury. And I'm there swinging it through the street, and then I just was like, oh, what do I actually do with this? Do you know what I mean? Like, what am I going to do? And then I cast a spell on it, and then it went really well, like too well. And I was like, oh, okay. I kind of scared myself a little bit. And then I was like, okay, I'm not going to use it. And then I ended up using it again. And so we've kind of got to this point now where it's actually my spell buddy. It's like it comes out for all the spell working. It's, it came to the moot recently. And so it's just, I love that process of getting to know your tools and having them be a part and kind of familiar. Almost, I'd say not familiar spirits necessarily, but being sort of more of the kind of animist side of things, I feel there is that kind of like, oh, we're getting taken off the shelf now. Oh, it's time for spell work. Yeah, okay, let's get to it. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. And I just love that. I just love it. And it's just like, I think it's the same for certain books. I definitely think with Brie Nagann's book, Grave to Witchcraft, it's covered like your lovely pentagram where it's covered in bits and bobs and oil and powders and stuff like that, and it's just a complete mess. But it really, it's one of those things that's got a kind of life of its own almost. And I'm a big fan of books. And do you think, the planner, do you think there's going to be a book alongside that at some point? Do you think what's next? I know you're doing some online courses.
Yeah, we're doing some workshops which have gone very well. It's an opportunity just to do a bit of a deep dive. They've all been online, but we have had a few requests of doing something more kind of face-to-face, and again, maybe being able to get a bit really practical, going back to the thing before about how do you make incense, how do you dress candles, really just doing some kind of practical demos, which would be really great to do maybe next year. So yes, we'll wait and see. We're working on the waxing year next year. I've got some changes in mind, got a new cover coming, some new different ways of couple of different ideas how we might do it. Still keeping the same basic format of something to do each week, but maybe changing that up a little bit. But yes, we're it's exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. I love it because it's just like, and I love the Facebook group as well, because it's so interactive, and you get to talk with both of you, and you get to just have that kind of wonderful resource there, and which is just fantastic. And I think yeah, I think a lot of times we sort of have a bit of a go at social media, don't we? But actually, it's been fantastic in terms of getting to know yourself and, you know, and other folks. And I just think it's so accessible. And obviously getting to know like authors and things like that, and book recommendations is one of my, you know, huge things. And you know, I sort of aim to ask, and ask Brie as well, and hopefully people in the future, you know, what are your key recommendations? Because this is where like the juicy goodness comes out of like all these things. Because, you know, on my bookshelf, I know I don't, you can see it's like stacked and there's bits everywhere. But give me more book recommendations. Go on, give me some really good ones.
Well, at the minute, I'm really taken with a lot of Jason Miller's work, his Sorcerer's Handbook, and his idea around those kind of macro, and he's like me. He's got a big statement in one of his books about, you know, he's talking about this intent and everything, and he's, you know, he's like, everything matters. You know, like, we haven't had these grimoires going back thousands of years, you know, with kind of various spells and rituals in. All of those things were put in for a reason, but there is an importance to all of those things. So, you know, whatever you're doing in the spell, kind of absolutely everything matters. And I think that's a really become an important concept for me. So I think his 21 Keys and just spellcraft book, it was really quite influential. Certainly helped me really formulate my thinking for the spellcraft workshop. I thought he had some kind of really, really powerful ideas in there, and that idea of kind of the macro micro enchantments is something that I definitely continue to work with.
Oh, that's so good. I love that, because I've been reading through properly. I've had it on the bookcase for a while, but been reading probably through his protection and reversal magic. And it's nice to get someone who kind of takes magic like a little bit more in depth and a little bit more seriously in a way. I think that's
I think he does in that respect. It is a bit more of a little bit maybe more sorcery than witchcraft in that respect. So it did take me a little bit to sort of shift my mindset. It is a different, you know, he's not talking about herbs and candles, you know, it is a bit more of a sorcery mindset, but once I got my head around that, I got a lot out of it. I'm very excited about Thorn Mooney's new book. I've had it on pre-order for ages. I did, although far from Wiccan, I got a lot out of her traditional Wicca book. And I think there's not a lot of books for more advanced practitioners. And her new book is aimed at the more kind of advanced practitioner, or you know, people who've maybe been at it a while and maybe hit a bit of a roadblock or a bit of a slump. So I've had that on pre-order for ages, and I'm really quite excited about that coming out. I think she's one of the, again, takes a bit more of an academic approach. You know, she's an academic, isn't she? By practice, a lot of work on theology. So again, comes from just a bit more of a thoughtful approach, and as maybe, I like books that are distangling the overlap, I think, between kind of manifestation and that law of attraction that has infiltrated an awful lot of witchcraft literature, hasn't it, of late? And there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's got a lot of validity, and I think a lot of the you know, mindfulness and a lot of the practices within that are extremely valid. And I'm not trying to discredit any of that, but I think it's important we understand what it is and what it isn't, and how it does or doesn't fit with witchcraft.
I think it can be its own magic, can't it, in its way. But whether it's witchcraft or not is one of those things. I think it's sometimes witchcraft that folks can do who don't call themselves witches, who wouldn't identify with that necessarily. And the from like reviews, and I know for a few years it's been on my wish list, the traditional Wicca is meant to be the book that's like the book to read if you want to actually get to the heart of what Wicca is actually about, because there is that kind of thing of neo-Wicca versus traditional, and actually what is it about, not what is the sort of neo-Wicca / new age kind of take on it. So that's really cool. Okay.
So I am excited about her book. And there's a lot of I enjoyed the Year of the Witch by Temperance Alden as well, taking a bit of a different look to the Wheel of the Year as well, and encouraging people to explore the Wheel of the Year for themselves and what it means to them. And you know, it was nice to see a book that about the Wheel of the Year that isn't following, you know, the sun and the holly king, and, you know, they've got that very kind of Wiccan theist approach that is actually disentangled from that, genuinely talks about some of the history, you know, some of the actual history associated with some of this, but also gives lots of ideas about how we can kind of practice it modern, but has taken away maybe a lot of the Wiccan influence around how we view the wheel of the year. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think that what I appreciated about that book was the way they looked into etymologies of words, and they kind of explored words a little, because I'm a big fan. I'm hoping to do an etymology series. I know we were talking about sort of definitions before and people actually knowing what they're doing. And so I'm hoping to do an etymology series just to clear a few terms up, hopefully, at least from my take. So yes, that's definitely one. And I do with the Wheel of the Year as well. I think it's interesting sort of breaking down practices into sort of the essentials. And I know we're both big fans of Kellyanne Maddox as well.
Yeah.
And with Rebel Witch, I thought that was, what's your take on that book? Because I know my take. What's your take on Rebel Witch?
Oh, I think that's one of the most important witchcraft books for years and years, really. I think it's absolutely, you know, really kind of groundbreaking in a lot of respects. I think the creativity and ideas of practice that went into that book is quite like nothing I've seen, really. I think some things that never have occurred to me, things like mask magic and things like that. I was just like, I spent most of my time just kind of scribbling notes down and being just like, wow, that is yeah, absolutely brilliant book.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's one of those ones that is definitely, yeah, important is the word with that, because it is so, what I found really refreshing with it was just so tailor, like you could tailor everything, and it was different approaches to doing things, and it was very much like, you know, giving you the room, the breathing space to create your own practice. And I thought it was brave to not include correspondences in the book. You know, I thought that was a huge sort of thing, because often, you know, correspondence lists are very, very helpful, you know, and I definitely value yours. But I think sometimes having that moment to think about it and looking at a correspondences list not as copy and paste, but as, you know, how do I feel with this plant? And it led me to sort of look more into Culpeper and those sort of original kind of correspondences, and then planetary correspondences, and actually having spending that time like looking into the individual plants and how you feel with different things or different objects even, it makes it much more connecting with yourself. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. Do you have any other sort of book recommendations that you think are going to be stonking or are particularly good?
I've sort of fallen down a bit of a plant magic hole recently. So I've been really impressed with Julia Dias's Plant Witchery book that's just come out. And it's folk magic and healing, which it's a really unusual name. What's the name? Inkwright, Fez Inkwright. Some really charming little diagrams, and I shared it on my Instagram. I only kind of got it the other day, but it's got all kind of your main plants in there, so sort of correspondences, but actually tells you some absolutely lovely kind of folk tales about it, and that really appeals to me because it goes back to my kind of, for me, where some of the power of correspondences kind of come from. You know, when I found out that basil's associated with love because it was given to newlyweds back in ancient Greece, and that's where I have association with love, just was things like that just absolutely blow my mind. So yeah, absolutely, that it looks really, I haven't fully read it, but the bits I've looked at so far look really good.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I dig that, because honestly I've been getting more and more into plants. I've been growing my little herb section on the windowsill and it's just like sage and parsley, you know, garden sage and parsley. I've just been going for it, and it's just that sort of thing of seeing how the plant itself grows as well. And I think experiencing that kind of firsthand, if you can, even if it's just a pot somewhere, is actually really cool and takes it from the page to sort of, and I think those books really, you know, they encourage you to explore it a little bit more, and things like the folklore. I definitely, yeah, I love the sort of folklore of plants, and there's so many different, you know, things you can look at in there. And I love with, you know, honeysuckle I have grown in the bedroom, and it's for that sort of the binding aspect, because it's that connecting in terms of love and things like that. And just seeing it, you know, I think you can learn a lot from plants in terms of how they grow and how they sort of focus their energy towards like what they're trying to go to, and then they kind of, with honeysuckle at least, it lets some of the leaves kind of go, and it's that sort of in life thinking of, oh, you know, that's actually just focusing myself where I've got growth to come, and then letting go of the stuff that perhaps isn't, you know, helping me do that. And it's that sort of weird thing of exploring it a bit further, which I just, I really dig. Yeah, definitely. And with you know, obviously we talked about authors. Is there any, and you spoke about small businesses and other people and other creators, is there anyone who you would give a shout out to, who you know you think people should check out?
For the most exquisite, I mean, be prepared to be bankrupt. And I regularly contact her saying, you were going to get me divorced because I'm having to sneak your candles into the house because I'm not meant to be buying.
Oh, not candles, man. You're going to kill me here.
Candles of the moon
on
Instagram. Oh, my life. The work is just stunning.
Oh, that's exciting. I think that.
Yeah. And it's not a small business, but just in terms of a beautiful Instagram, the Witch's Stone on Instagram, I'm a huge fan of. Does more traditional. She's one of the editors in the Witchology magazine, I think, but her account, just in terms of people who are more interested in kind of traditional witchcraft, absolutely beautiful account. There's definitely a bit of a growing traditional witchcraft scene on Instagram, which is really good to see. So I think for a long time it's been quite dominated by a lot of the stuff kind of coming over from America, hasn't it? So kind of being able to find more UK, more maybe folk magic traditional practices. You definitely start to kind of see a bit of an increase in that, which is great.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it's great. I think I always say when you first get into witchcraft, you kind of funnel out and then you funnel in after a while. And I think once you get that bit more of a defined edge to things, then you know, you kind of get that, you want that more gritty stuff that's sort of getting in there and getting into the detail. Yeah, I definitely dig that. Where can we find you then and pick your witchy brains? Where can we find you on the interwebs?
Yes, so you can find me personally as the Geordie Witch on Instagram. Always happy to chat with people in DMs or in the comment section. And then you will find Secrets of the Cauldron, which is my little witchy biz with Cheryl Kerr Tarot, on Instagram, Facebook, and Secrets of the Cauldron website. We do, that's got a little app attached to it where we do sort of free rituals, free spells. People sign up to the mailing list. We send out regular kind of little updates about what's going on with the energy, or we did a free little ritual for the equinox. And we get lovely feedback from that. Really heartens me actually when I ask people, you know, we say we're thinking of doing something, do you want to see a ritual or a spell? The amount of people who genuinely are interested in ritual and not just spell work. I guess I maybe had presumed, especially maybe the younger generation, it might be all about kind of, you know, the spells and the sexy bit of witchcraft, aren't they? Might be. So it's really nice to say people are genuinely, if you give them the choice, we get more people asking for rituals than we do spell work, which is really interesting. So that's been really nice to explore with people.
That's so cool. And is there anything else you wanted to add or talk about?
I think I've probably talked myself out now. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, I'm so pleased. Thank you so much. I know it's been a long time coming. I've wanted to get you on here, and just an absolute joy. And you know, you're one of those people that I just feel I'm privileged to know, and I just think
appreciate
that. Just stunning, man. And you know, you were at the WitchCon as well. You were at SAS WitchCon.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And I really loved your takes on the divination thing there, which is really cool. witchcon.com for the recordings of that. So yeah, just awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Kath.
Oh no, thank you so much, and for being such a fan and advocate of our work with the planner. We do appreciate your support. You've always, from us launching it, really supported it. We really do appreciate that.
You're welcome.